If you like Ship Chat, then consider becoming a channel member to support us further. Thank you very much. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Nebula class. It wasn't really on the schedule, but it really fits quite nicely with the theme of doing the derivations of the larger heavy cruisers that we've been covering with the Miranda and Centaur, and it's actually appeared quite a lot in episodes of Battle Space, and so I thought it'd be a good time to really go through the class and take a look at it in detail. So in real life, well, it's got a bit of a complex design history, and really it depends on what you deem a Nebula class is. It was begun as a kit bash for a Wolf 359. It was built by Ed Miriaki, which had the nacelles off the back and using the Galaxy hull. Whether you want to call that monstrosity as a Nebula class is really up to you, but it's you don't really see it at all. It's hardly one of the more prominent kit bashes. In any case, after that, it was redesigned by Rick Sternbach and Mike Okuda, and even then it's not really remained consistent. There have been several distinct models, going from at least 2 different physical models and 1 CG model, so there's quite a lot of different incarnations, both in universe and out of universe. In any case, in universe, the Federation always likes to have a light cruiser variant of their heavy cruisers, and it was going to be no different with the Galaxy, other than the fact that the Nebula is, well, it's looking at it, it's hardly no one's going to be calling this a light cruiser. No one's going to be calling the Galaxy a heavy cruiser. We'll call it a battleship and perhaps leave it at that. Suffice it to say, as a more compact variant of the Galaxy, it actually doesn't have a huge amount in common with its predecessors. It's kind of a merging of both and does some things differently. It's the first one to use both the primary hull and the secondary hull of its parent design. Neither the Miranda nor the Centaur do the same. In the case of the Miranda, it has the saucer and an additional superstructure, and Starfleet didn't really like the idea of doing that. They felt they could just save more cost by just integrating saucer into the secondary hull and just eliminate the neck. And that's also reflective of a different doctrine that's really gone on at this point. With the Miranda, there is an interest in it having performance. It is very much meant to respond to a potential Klingon threat. By the time the Nebula is being designed, no such threats exist, so really performance was by the by, really. So if the Galaxy is perhaps a bit of an athlete, then the Nebula is really the brother who sits on the sofa at home, but still nonetheless quite capable. So while essentially, with the restructuring that takes place, it creates a more compact ship that reasonably has pretty much the same capabilities other than in performance. It's significantly slower than the Galaxy, but even then it's still using the same power plant and engine, so still is quite a quick ship around the park, all things considered. It was always intended to be modular, and that was part of the reason they had a secondary hull. They found while the Miranda was modular, it was quite difficult to actually switch out modules, so they wanted something that could more easily mount the modules on the back, and they felt that including it into the secondary hull would be make things easier to swap out different mission modules. In terms of what we see an experimental with smaller sets of warp nacelles, which is quite unusual, although actually we'll later see the Dominion do the same, and that works quite well for them, so there was maybe some sense behind it, although it didn't really catch on. The first real module we see is the AWACS module, which is a long large sensor dome. It's mounted on top of 2 struts. Now this is very important. This was the early kind of mounting, because it allowed for the saucer shuttle bay to actually open, and the shuttle could still fly out the back. In the later ones you couldn't really do that, but they didn't seem to care that much. In any case, they found that module, it was too tall, made the ship's warp profile too large, and wasn't all that useful. The modern sensor technologies were improving so quickly it was kind of redundant. You didn't end up needing really an AWACS module. So essentially most Nebula class ships end up with the same sensor / dorsal module, which could vary in its contents, but generally was carrying a lot of torpedoes. And in that respect, it actually really made it quite a formidable fighter, which was really saying something, given that it's built out of Galaxy-class parts. It's already got a strong pedigree to it, and it certainly wasn't made any worse by adding more torpedo capacity. And indeed, we'd see it be able to take on easily most ships of its era very effectively. They changed the module mounting from 2 struts to a single larger strut, and as I said, that blocked the shuttle bay, but they didn't really care, and overall it actually increased internal volume of the ship to the point where it actually does actually have a sort of a superstructure on the back anyway. So even though they wanted to save costs, the additional module mounting, all of that palaver, ended up causing it to have a superstructure just built into the secondary hull rather than the primary, but I suppose it made sense to them in the end. That really brings us to the 2 main variants that we see. The earlier variants, there was problems integrating the warp core, and that actually meant that they had to slightly extend the secondary hull, give it a greater draft, which is why it's kind of got this wider deflector aperture. There's a sort of a greater dip in the secondary hull, and that's to allow the proper mounting of the warp core, because of course in the Galaxy the same warp core has all the room up through the neck and the like, but there wasn't quite enough room initially, so they had to do a bit of extension to get it all in, but it performed perfectly well. It just didn't look particularly pleasant, but they eventually managed to iron that out, and it, in that point, is pretty much indistinguishable from its Galaxy class heritage. It's got the same primary and secondary hull, and the only real difference is the superstructure. That's the only unique part, as well as the modules. But otherwise, it's, as I say, pretty much what you get is pretty much a Galaxy class, but smaller and more compact. It's not going to be winning any races, but it's perfectly capable of standing toe-to-toe with a Galaxy class in a fight. The only edge the Galaxy's really going to have, it's probably going to in fact have the advantage of firepower with that torpedo module. The Galaxy, of course, it has the advantage of speed and agility, so it's really a close run race in that instance. And so because of that, they were actually, during the Dominion War, they would actually be paired with Galaxies in Galaxy wings, because they were essentially the same. One would basically have the sort of nitty-gritty fighting role. That would generally be the Nebulas. They would take on the fighting, the more intense parts of the fighting, and then when it came to pursuit and patrol, it was then the Galaxies that would do all of that. So they ended up working very well together, and essentially in peacetime they're both exploratory vessels, just one is slightly more specialised than the other. And in terms of internal features, it's essentially a Galaxy class. We do see some more different bridges from it, but that's probably largely down to individual captains' preferences and sub-variants. But overall, in terms of what you could expect on crew accommodations. That's it's really quite a comfortable ship to be living on, and nevertheless, it's still a very it was a very effective explorer and really quite an impressive fighting ship as well. There was really very little the Dominion had that could properly take this on. The only thing that could really edge it out was going to be the Dominion battlecruiser. Even then, though, the Nebula still had that advantage in firepower. It really was quite a tough and robust ship, but in terms of its lineage with relation to the Miranda and the Centaur, it really is a bit of a ugly duckling, something of a sticks out like a sore thumb, really. It's definitely not a light cruiser, but an impressive ship nonetheless.